Greetings, traveler of the leaves. Tonight, I'll be your guide on a path that isn't walked with feet, but with the heart. What I'm about to tell you isn't written in the scrolls of the hidden leaf, nor in the elders' archives. It's a story whispered by the wind, held in the silence of those who wait. They speak of a name, Rock Lee, also known as the Taijutsu Master. I see you've arrived with your eyes lowered, like someone who's run too far or lost too much. Maybe you're tired, maybe searching for something you no longer remember by name. So come, sit here with me beneath this old tree where the leaves don't fall. They remember. The ground is soft, the wind is gentle, and for now, the world can wait. Let the words drift slowly, like a quiet rain. Here, everything moves with care. Nothing needs to be conquered, only felt, only remembered. Ready? Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let my voice carry you back to before the pain, to within yourself. Dawn broke over the training grounds, painting the worn posts and packed earth in shades of gold and amber. But Rock Lee had been there for hours already, his bandaged hands striking a wooden post with rhythmic precision. 1,000 punches with the right hand, 1,000 with the left. The sound echoed in the morning stillness, a heartbeat made audible. Have you ever wanted something so deeply that its absence shaped you like water-shaped stone? Sweat trickled down his face, dampening the green jumpsuit that had become as much a part of him as his own skin. His breathing remained controlled, measured, each inhale a gift, each exhale a release. The sun climbed higher, warming his shoulders, but Lee didn't pause. The body remembers what the mind practices, he whispered to himself. Words taught to him by Gai-sensei, words he had made his own through endless repetition. 897, 898. His knuckles ached beneath the bandages, but pain was an old friend now, a teacher, a reminder that he was present, that he was trying, that he had not given up. What if the things we lack are not our greatest weakness, but the source of our deepest strength? Other shinobi could mold chakra into ninjutsu, could weave illusions with genjutsu. Lee had been born without that ability, his chakra network unable to perform the techniques that came naturally to others. A defect, some had called it, a tragedy, an insurmountable limitation. 999, 1,000. Lee stepped back from the post, bowing slightly to it as if to a respected opponent. The wood was dented where his fists had struck, year after year, day after day, evidence of persistence, if not perfection. In the distance, birds called to one another, their voices clear in the morning air. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. The world continuing its gentle rhythm, unconcerned with one young man's struggle, one young man's dream. I will prove that hard work alone can overcome natural talent, Lee said, the familiar promise warming him from within, not spoken in defiance now, but in quiet certainty, a truth he had inscribed on his bones through thousands of hours of training. Is determination not its own kind of jutsu? Perseverance not its own form of magic? He unwrapped the bandages from his hands, examining the calluses, the scars, the evidence of his journey written on his skin. Hands that could not form seals for ninjutsu, but could break stone, could move faster than the eye could follow, could protect what he loved. Not empty after all, never empty. Lee sat beneath a tree at the edge of the training ground, legs crossed, back straight, allowing his breathing to slow. The village was waking now, distant sounds of shops opening, of people beginning their day, life continuing all around him, life he had sworn to protect. The morning light caught on a dewdrop, clinging to a blade of grass near his foot. For a moment, it held all the colors of the world in its perfect sphere. Then it fell, soaking into the earth, becoming part of something larger than itself. The lotus of the leaf blooms twice, Lee murmured, the saying a touchstone, a reminder of transformations yet to come. He closed his eyes, feeling the subtle ache in his muscles, the steady beat of his heart, the air filling his lungs. This body that had been deemed insufficient, this vessel he had forged through will and work into something powerful. What makes a shinobi? The jutsu they wield, or the heart that guides their hands? In the gentle silence of morning meditation, Rock Lee found his answer, once again, as he did every day, in the quiet between movements, in the breath between strikes, in the pause between battles, not in what he lacked, but in what he had built with empty hands and an unbreakable spirit. Evening settled over the leaf village, stars appearing one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. On a hill overlooking the training grounds, Rock Lee sat beside his sensei, Might Guy. They had completed their daily training, 500 laps around the village, 200 push-ups, 3 hours of sparring. Now they rested, muscles pleasantly tired, watching the lights of the village flicker on below. Have you ever met someone who saw in you what you could not yet see in yourself? You've improved your leaf hurricane, Guy said, his voice gentler than most people ever heard it. The rotation is smoother, more power, without sacrificing control. Lee nodded, pride warming his chest at the praise. Thank you, Guy-sensei. I've been practicing the technique you showed me for maintaining balance during the spin. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that exists only between people who understand each other completely. Teacher and student, mentor and protege. Mirror images separated by years but united by spirit. What is a true teacher but someone who lends you their faith until you can find your own? The moon rose over the Hokage monument, casting long shadows across the village. Lee watched its slow ascent, thinking of all the nights he had trained beneath its silver light, when sleep eluded him, when doubts crept in, when the path seemed longest. I remember the day I met you, Guy said suddenly, his gaze still on the village below. A boy, they said, couldn't be a ninja, couldn't master chakra. A boy who refused to believe that was the end of his story. Lee's throat tightened with emotion. He remembered, too, the mockery of classmates, the pity of teachers, the growing certainty that his dream was beyond reach, until Gi-sensei had appeared, like a whirlwind in green, speaking of youth and effort and possibilities that Lee had almost stopped believing in. You were the first person who didn't look at what I lacked, Lee said quietly. You saw what could be, not what wasn't. Guy turned to him, his smile softer than his usual blinding grin, but no less genuine, because I recognized myself in you, Lee. The struggle, the determination, the refusal to be defined by limitations. Is there any bond stronger than the one forged through shared struggle? Night insects began their chorus around them, a natural symphony that rose and fell like breathing. In the distance, a shooting star traced a brief, brilliant path across the sky. Lee followed its arc, making a silent wish, not for power or recognition, but for the strength to continue, to honor the faith placed in him. Sometimes, Lee admitted, I still fear I will never be enough, that no matter how hard I work, it won't be sufficient. Guy placed a hand on his student's shoulder, the touch conveying more than words could. The only failure is in stopping, Lee. Everything else is just part of the journey. Lee nodded, the familiar words settling into his heart like pebbles at the bottom of a clear stream. He had heard them before, would hear them again, would need to be reminded, just as Guy had once needed reminding from his own sensei. The cycle continuing, wisdom passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. What if our greatest strength lies not in standing alone, but in the courage to accept the hand extended toward us? Stars multiplied overhead, countless points of light in the vast darkness. Lee thought of all the ninjas who had come before him, all those who would come after, an unbroken chain stretching back through time, forward into the future, each finding their own way, their own ninja path. Tomorrow, Guy said, rising to his feet with characteristic energy, 550 laps around the village before breakfast. Lee jumped up, bowing deeply. Yes, Guy-sensei. The challenge accepted, the bond reaffirmed, the journey continuing, step by step, day by day. As they made their way back down the hill toward the village, Lee glanced once more at the moon overhead. Its light caught on the tears that had formed, unbidden, in the corners of his eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude for the path, for the struggle, for the sensei who walked beside him, showing him the way, for the reflection he saw in Guy's eyes, not the boy he had been, but the man he was becoming. Midnight found Rock Lee sitting cross-legged on the floor of his small apartment, surrounded by candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Before him lay his leg weights, temporarily removed for the night's meditation. Without them, he always felt strangely light, as if he might float away if he didn't anchor himself to the earth. The village slept beyond his window, but Lee had found himself restless tonight, thoughts circling like birds that couldn't find a place to land. So, he had lit the candles, assumed the position Guy-sensei had taught him, and turned his attention inward to the flow of his own life force, to the gates that lay within. Have you ever felt a power inside you that frightened you with its vastness? His breathing slowed, deepened. The 8 gates, those points within the body where chakra flow was limited, where power was held in check. Most ninja never learned to open even the first. Lee had mastered 5, with Guy-sensei's guidance, each a doorway to greater strength, each exacting a terrible price on the body that contained them. Power and sacrifice, Lee whispered to the empty room, to the dancing flames, always balanced. The 5th gate, the gate of closing, was as far as Lee could safely go for now. Beyond that lay realms of power that could tear a body apart from within, could burn a life to ash, in exchange for momentary transcendence. The 6th gate of joy, the 7th gate of shock, and finally, the 8th gate of death. The ultimate exchange, the final sacrifice. What price would you pay for the power to protect what matters most? A candle flame wavered, then steadied, its light reflecting in Lee's dark eyes. He had seen Guy-sensei open the 7th gate once, had witnessed the awe-inspiring power and the terrible aftermath, had helped his sensei home afterward, his body racked with pain, damaged by the very power it had channeled. Is it worth it? Lee had asked then, voice small with concern. Guy had looked at him through eyes clouded with exhaustion, but bright with certainty. To protect what I love, always. Such a simple answer to such a profound question. Yet it had resonated within Lee like a bell struck at exactly the right frequency, had vibrated along the pathways of his being, settling finally in the core of who he was. Is there anything more beautiful than the willingness to give everything for something larger than yourself? Lee's hands rested on his knees, palms upward, open, receiving and giving, taking in the stillness of the night, offering back his focused presence. The candle flames remained steady now, as if responding to his deepening calm. The 8 gates, a path of power unlike ninjutsu or genjutsu, a way forward that had been there all along, waiting for someone with the spirit to walk it. Not a path of genius or bloodline limits, but of pure determination, of work, of will. His path. I don't need to be a genius, Lee murmured. Words spoken, not in resignation, but in acceptance, in peace. I just need to be myself, completely. The tension that had driven him to this midnight meditation began to dissolve, like mist beneath the morning sun. His shoulders relaxed. His breath came easier. The restlessness that had kept sleep at bay transformed into something quieter, deeper, a stillness that wasn't empty, but full. Not the absence of emotion, but its perfect balance. Outside, an owl called once, then fell silent. The moon cast a square of silver light through his window, touching the far wall, the world turning in its slow, certain way, unconcerned with one young man's struggles, one young man's revelations. What if our limitations are not obstacles, but invitations to discover paths others cannot see? Lee opened his eyes, the candlelight seeming brighter. After the darkness behind his eyelids, he would sleep soon, would rest his body for tomorrow's training, for the endless work of becoming. But for now, in this quiet moment between one day and the next, Rock Lee sat with the knowledge of the gates within him, with the power they offered and the price they demanded, with the choice they represented, not just of how to fight, but of how to live, with open hands, with an open heart, with the understanding that true strength wasn't about what you could grasp and hold, but what you were willing to give. The candles burned on, witnesses to a silent covenant, renewed in the privacy of midnight, a promise made not to others, but to himself, to be worthy of the power, to be worthy of the path, to be worthy of the faith placed in him by those who saw what he could become, to be Rock Lee completely. Dawn mist hung over the forest clearing, where Rock Lee performed his morning kata, moving through the familiar forms with fluid precision. Each movement flowed into the next, like water finding its natural course. His leg weights, strapped firmly in place once more, reminded him with every step of the resistance he had chosen, the burden he had willingly accepted. Not punishment, but preparation. Not limitation, but liberation, gradually earned through persistent effort. Have you ever found freedom in the discipline you impose upon yourself? Birds began their morning songs in the trees around him, a natural counterpoint to the rhythm of his movements. Lee listened to them as he continued the kata, finding harmony between their music and his motion. Nature did not hurry, yet everything was accomplished, a lesson he was still learning. One more set, he told himself, beginning the sequence again from the first position, not from dissatisfaction with the previous attempt, but from understanding that mastery came through repetition, through doing the same thing thousands of times with full attention, until the body knew it so deeply that thought became unnecessary. The mist began to dissipate as the sun climbed higher, golden light filtering through the canopy of leaves overhead, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns. Lee's shadow moved with him, a silent partner in his solitary dance. What whispers does your body share when you finally learn to listen? Completing the kata, Lee bowed to an imaginary opponent, to the forest, to the day itself. Sweat dampened his green jumpsuit, his breathing slightly elevated, but controlled. He had been training since before sunrise, would continue until long after sunset, not driven by desperation anymore, but by something quieter, deeper, the steady current of purpose that had become the foundation of his life. He walked to a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, sitting to unwrap the bandages from his hands. The morning air felt cool against his skin, a pleasant contrast to the warmth of exertion. As he rewrapped his hands with fresh bandages, Lee thought about the weights he carried, some visible, like those strapped to his legs, others invisible, but no less real. The weight of being different in a village of prodigies and clan heirs. The weight of a path that offered no shortcuts, no sudden breakthroughs, only gradual progress earned through sweat and pain. The weight of promises made to Gai-sensei, to his teammates, to himself. But these were weights he had chosen, Burdens transformed into anchors that kept him grounded when the world seemed to spin too quickly, when doubts threatened to carry him away. Is there anything more empowering than claiming your struggles as your own chosen path? A squirrel paused on a nearby branch, regarding him with bright, curious eyes before continuing on its morning journey. Lee watched it go, smiling slightly. Even the smallest creatures had their own paths to walk, their own purposes to fulfill. He finished rewrapping his hands, flexing his fingers to ensure the bandages were neither too tight nor too loose. Perfect balance, as in all things. The art of preparation, of maintenance, was as important as the training itself. Another lesson from Guy Sensei that extended beyond the merely physical. Take care of what takes care of you, his sensei often said, whether speaking of weapons, of bodies, or of bonds with comrades. Lee stood, rolling his shoulders, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles that had been thoroughly used. The forest around him was fully awake now, alive with the sounds and movements of countless beings going about their day. He would soon return to the village, to his team, to the missions and responsibilities that waited. But these morning hours belonged to him alone, to the work that no one witnessed, but that formed the foundation of everything he would do, everything he would be when others were watching. What hidden efforts shape the person others see? He gathered his water flask and towel, taking one last look at the clearing before turning toward the path that would lead him back to Konoha. The weights on his legs felt natural now, part of him, when they were eventually removed, in training, in battle, in moments of necessary transformation. The lightness that followed would seem almost like flying. That was the secret gift of the weights, of all self-imposed disciplines. They prepared you for moments of transcendence, built the strength that would be needed when limitations had to be temporarily set aside. Rock Lee walked the forest path, his footsteps steady, measured, each one carrying him forward on a journey that had no endpoint, no final destination, only continuous becoming. Each one an affirmation of the path he had chosen, the weights he had accepted, the person he was determined to be. One step at a time, one day at a time, the only way any journey of significance could be made. The weights a reminder with every movement, not of what held him back, but of what would one day help him soar. Sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, the light softening as day prepared to yield to night. Rock Lee sat alone on a bench in one of Konoha's small parks, his usually animated face quiet, thoughtful. His right arm was in a sling, his left leg wrapped in bandages, injuries from a mission completed, but at considerable cost. Have you ever smiled to hide the pain, to protect others from your struggles? Children played nearby, their laughter carrying on the evening air. Parents called them home for dinner, their voices gentle with familiar affection. Normal life continuing all around him, life made possible by the sacrifices of shinobi like himself and his comrades. Lee shifted slightly, wincing as the movement sent a twinge of pain through his healing body. The medical ninja had done their work well. He would recover fully, given time. But time was the one thing that always seemed in short supply, the one resource he couldn't acquire through additional training. Patience is also a form of strength, Guy Sensei had told him at the hospital. Sometimes the hardest thing for a passionate heart is to be still. Lee sighed, looking down at his bandaged hand. It was true. Sitting here, watching the day, end without having trained, without having improved in some measurable way, felt like failure, like surrender, like letting down everyone who believed in him. What if our deepest fears aren't of others' disappointment, but of our own? A tear formed, balanced precariously on his lower eyelid before breaking free, tracing a path down his cheek. Lee didn't wipe it away. Here, alone as night approached, he allowed himself what he never showed others: doubt, fear, the weight of expectations both external and self-imposed. The handsome devil of the Hidden Leaf Village, with his gleaming smile and unwavering optimism, the student who never complained, never gave up, never showed anything but absolute confidence in the power of youth and hard work. That was who they needed him to be, who he needed himself to be. But beneath that, there was these quiet tears in the gathering darkness, this uncertainty that visited in the spaces between battles, between training sessions, between the inspirational speeches and dramatic promises. Is strength found in never falling, or in rising every time you do? The last child was called home, the park emptying as families gathered for evening meals, for the comfortable routines of civilian life. Lee remained, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above, each one a point of light in the vastness, each one a reminder that darkness was never complete, never final. He thought of all the times he had fallen, been defeated, been told he could not continue, should not continue, after the Chunin exams, when his body had been broken so completely that even Gai-sensei's eyes had filled with tears at the prognosis. After surgeries that might have ended his career before it truly began. After battles where his best had not been enough, where even the gates had failed to grant victory. And yet, each time, he had risen again, had begun, once more, the long climb toward his goals, not because it was easy or certain, but because there was simply no other path he could walk and still be Rock Lee. The lotus of the leaf blooms twice, he whispered, to the emerging stars, to the growing darkness, the familiar mantra, a reminder, a promise, a lifeline thrown to himself across the waters of doubt. Another tear fell, then another. Not a flood, but a gentle release. Water nourishing soil, preparing it for new growth. What gardens grow from the tears we allow to fall in private moments? Lee finally wiped his face, taking a deep breath that expanded through his chest, pushing against the tightness there. Tomorrow, he would smile again, would train as much as his healing body allowed, would be the Rock Lee that everyone expected, that he expected of himself. But tonight, in this twilight moment between responsibilities, he honored the doubts, the fears, the tears that also formed part of his ninja way. Not weakness, but humanity. Not failure, but the necessary counterweight to his determination. The acknowledgement that the path was difficult, that the climb was steep, that sometimes it was only the hand of a friend or the memory of a promise that kept him moving forward. The first fireflies of evening appeared, small points of living light drifting through the park. Lee watched them, their gentle illumination, a different kind of strength than the harsh glare of midday sun, a reminder that there were many forms of light, many ways of finding one's path through darkness. He stood carefully, respecting his body's current limitations, while refusing to be defined by them. The tears had dried on his cheeks, but their release had left something lighter in his chest, something clearer in his mind. Rock Lee began the walk home through the gentle evening, his pace unhurried, his spirit quieter, but no less determined. Behind his silence, behind the healing injuries, behind the temporarily dimmed smile, the fire continued to burn, banked for now, tended carefully, but never extinguished, ready to blaze again when the time came, when the lotus was ready for its second blooming. Morning light filtered through the leaves of the great tree where Rock Lee sat, legs crossed, back straight, eyes closed. The training ground was empty, save for him, most shinobi either on missions or still at home with their families. Lee had come early, not to train his body today, but to train his mind. Have you ever noticed the space between your heartbeats? the moment of perfect stillness before the next pulse of life. His breathing was slow, measured, each inhale and exhale a conscious act. The bandages were gone now, his injuries healed through medical ninjutsu, and his own remarkable recuperative abilities. He could have returned to his usual training regimen, the 1,000 punches, the laps around the village, the weights that grew heavier each month. Instead, he sat in stillness, practicing what Guy Sensei called the other half of training, the cultivation of the mind that must accompany the development of the body, balance in all things, even for those who specialized in physical combat. A Taijutsu master must know the space between movements as intimately as the movements themselves, Guy had explained, must understand stillness to truly appreciate motion. The breeze stirred the leaves overhead, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on Lee's face. A distant bird called, then fell silent. The world continued its gentle rhythms all around him, unconcerned with one young man's inner journey. What treasures lie in the stillness we so often rush past? Lee focused on his heartbeat, feeling the steady pulse of life within his chest. Between each beat lay a moment of perfect quiet, a space so brief most never noticed it. Yet in training, in battle, in the most crucial moments, awareness of these infinitesimal pauses could mean the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death. His mind drifted to the first time he had truly understood this lesson, a sparring match with Neji, years ago, when his teammate's gentle fist had seemed impossible to counter. Each of Lee's attacks anticipated, each defense breached, until he had stood panting, frustrated on the verge of another defeat. "You're trying to be faster," Guy Sensei had said, afterward, "but what you need is to be more present, to find the spaces between his movements where possibility exists." Lee had not understood then, had nodded and committed to training harder, faster, stronger, his usual response to any challenge. But Guy had shaken his head, had led him to this very spot beneath the great tree, had taught him to sit and breathe and feel the pulse of his own life force. Is wisdom found in doing more or in seeing more clearly what already is? A squirrel darted down the trunk of the tree, pausing when it noticed Lee's presence. They regarded each other for a moment, the small creature alert, curious, the young man still but equally aware. Then the squirrel continued on its way, accepting Lee as part of the landscape, no threat to its morning journey. Lee smiled slightly, eyes still closed. That too was part of the lesson, to be so in harmony with one's surroundings that even the smallest creatures recognized you as belonging, as part of the natural order rather than separate from it. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, touching Lee's skin with gentle heat. His breathing remained steady, his posture perfect, his mind increasingly clear. The chatter of thoughts about training schedules, about missions, about proving himself had gradually quieted, leaving space for a deeper awareness. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not absence, but presence. What if the greatest strength isn't in what we do, but in how completely we inhabit each moment? When he finally opened his eyes, the training ground was bathed in full morning light. How long had he been sitting? It didn't matter. Time measured in heartbeats felt different from time measured by clocks and schedules. Lee stood in one fluid motion, his body feeling both light and solid, connected to the earth beneath his feet. The stillness he had cultivated didn't leave as he began to move. It came with him, informing each step, each gesture. The space between heartbeats expanded to encompass action as well as repose. This too was training. This too was part of the path toward mastery, not separate from the 1,000 punches and the endless laps, but their essential complement, the yin to their yang, creating the whole that was greater than either part alone. He began a slow kata, each movement flowing into the next, like water finding its natural course. No wasted energy, no unnecessary tension, just pure expression of form, of intention, of the connection between mind and body that was at the heart of Taijutsu. Rock Lee moved through the morning light, his usual exuberance tempered by the clarity of deep presence, not diminished, but refined, like metal passing through fire, emerging stronger, more perfectly itself. The space between heartbeats, the pause between inhalation and exhalation, the moment of perfect potential before movement began. These were his inheritance as much as the more visible aspects of his ninja way. These were the hidden foundations upon which all else was built. In stillness, he had found another kind of strength, another way to honor the path he had chosen, the legacy he had embraced, the person he was becoming. One breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one moment of complete presence flowing into the next. Twilight settled over the village, the sky deepening to indigo. As the last light faded from the west, Rock Lee stood at the edge of the Hyuga compound, waiting. He had come here often in recent months, always at this hour, always with the same purpose. A figure emerged from the main house, moving with graceful precision toward the gate where he waited. Neji Hyuga, his teammate, his rival, his friend. Their relationship was complex, layered with history, both shared and separate, with understanding that had been hard-won through years of training side by side. Have you ever found connection in the most unexpected places with the person who seems most different from yourself? You're on time, as always, Neji said as he approached, his voice carrying its usual calm certainty. Lee smiled, bowing slightly in greeting. The power of youth is punctual. A small twitch at the corner of Neji's mouth might have been the beginning of a smile, quickly controlled. Shall we begin? They walked together toward a small clearing at the edge of the Hyuga lands, a place they had claimed for these twilight sessions. Not their usual training, no sparring, no competition, no tests of strength or speed. Something different, something that had begun almost by accident and had gradually become a ritual of sorts. What walls fall when we share our different kinds of wisdom? In the clearing, they assumed their positions, facing each other, seated on simple cushions they kept stored in a hollow tree nearby. The last light was fading rapidly now, the first stars appearing overhead. Soon it would be fully dark. Close your eyes, Neji instructed, his voice softer than it ever was during daylight hours. Lee obeyed, feeling the familiar mix of anticipation and nervousness. This exercise always challenged him in ways that physical training never did, pushed against his natural inclination toward movement and action. Now, extend your awareness, Neji continued. Not with your eyes, not with your ears. Feel the world around you. Lee took a deep breath, trying to sense what lay beyond his immediate body, the ground beneath him, the air against his skin, the subtle shifts in temperature and pressure that indicated presence, movement, life. It had begun months ago, after a mission where Lee had been temporarily blinded by an enemy technique. He had floundered, his taijutsu severely compromised without vision to guide it. Afterward, still shaken by the experience, he had asked Neji a question. How do you see the world when you activate your Byakugan? When you look beyond what ordinary eyes can perceive? Instead of answering directly, Neji had offered to teach him something, not the Byakugan, which was impossible, but a different kind of perception, a sensitivity to the world that didn't rely on visual input alone. Is true vision found in what our eyes can see, or in what our hearts can understand? There's a rabbit, Lee said suddenly, the awareness coming to him not as an image, but as a feeling, a sense of movement and life about 10 feet to his right, just at the edge of the clearing. Yes, Neji confirmed, his voice betraying a hint of approval. And what else? Lee concentrated, extending his awareness further, trying to emulate what Neji had taught him over these many sessions, not to see as the Hyuga saw with their Keki Genkai, but to develop his own way of perceiving the world through senses most ninja left undeveloped. The wind is changing direction, he said after a moment, shifting from east to north, and he paused, reaching for a sensation at the edge of his awareness. Someone is watching us from the main house. Hinata, Neji supplied. She often observes our sessions, though she thinks we don't notice. Lee nodded, keeping his eyes closed, focusing on the subtle impressions that came to him. This was so different from his usual training. No movement, no exertion, no visible signs of progress. Just this gradual, almost imperceptible development of awareness. Yet it had already saved his life once, on a mission where an ambush had been set in absolute darkness. He had sensed the attackers before they struck, had been able to warn his team to fight effectively despite the lack of visibility. What strengths lie dormant within us, waiting only for the right teacher to awaken them? You're improving, Neji said, the words simple, but carrying weight coming from someone so sparing with praise. Your awareness extends almost as far as it would, with open eyes now. Lee smiled, feeling a quiet pride different from the exuberant joy that accompanied mastery of a new taijutsu technique. This was subtler, deeper somehow, a different kind of growth. They continued the exercise as full darkness, embraced the clearing as stars multiplied overhead, as night creatures began their quiet movements through the surrounding forest. Two young men sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, developing a kind of sight that had nothing to do with vision. Different paths, different gifts, different challenges. Yet here, in this twilight practice, they found common ground, the genius of the Hyuga clan and the Taijutsu specialist who couldn't mold chakra, each with something to teach, something to learn. Thank you, Neji, Lee said as they finally opened their eyes, the session complete. Neji inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement and acceptance in the gesture. Until tomorrow. As they walked back toward the village, Lee thought about how strange life was, how the person who had once seemed most his opposite had become one of his greatest teachers, how limitations could become doorways to unexpected strengths, how the ninja path was never quite what you expected it to be. The stars shone overhead, countless points of light in the vast darkness, seen and unseen, known and unknown, both equally real, equally important, like the many ways of perceiving the world, of moving through it, of finding one's own truth within it. Rock Lee walked beside his friend, his rival, his teacher, grateful for unseeing eyes that had helped him learn to truly see. Full moonlight bathed the summit of the Hokage monument, turning the stone to silver beneath the night sky. Rock Lee sat cross-legged atop the carved head of the third Hokage, gazing out over the sleeping village. Lights still burned in a few windows, hospital rooms where healing continued through the night, guard posts where shinobi kept their vigilant watch, homes where new parents tended to wakeful babies, life continuing in all its forms, protected by the stone faces beneath him, by the ninja who had pledged themselves to the village's safety. Have you ever looked back on your journey and realized that every step, even the painful ones, led you exactly where you needed to be? The night air was cool against Lee's skin, carrying the scents of pine and distant water. He breathed deeply, filling his lungs, feeling the steady beat of his heart. His body, once deemed inadequate, once broken almost beyond repair, now strong, capable, a finely honed instrument for protecting what mattered. I never expected to come this far, he said quietly to the night, to the stars, to himself. There had been so many moments when failure had seemed not just possible but inevitable. So many voices, external and internal, questioning whether his path was viable, whether hard work alone could truly overcome natural talent and innate limitation. Yet here he sat, a respected jonin of the Hidden Leaf, a Taijutsu master whose name was known throughout the 5 great nations, not because he had been born with special eyes or a powerful bloodline limit, but because he had refused to accept the boundaries others tried to place around his potential. What if our greatest victory isn't in achieving our dreams, but in remaining true to ourselves along the way? Lee looked down at his hands, scarred and calloused from countless hours of training, hands that could move faster than the eye could follow, that could break stone, that could open the inner gates and channel power that defied ordinary limitation, hands that had also learned gentleness, how to tend wounds, how to help a fallen comrade, how to guide younger ninja just beginning their own journeys. He thought of all the people who had shaped him. Guy Sensei, with his boundless faith and exuberant spirit. Neji, with his genius and eventual friendship. Tenten, with her practicality and unwavering support. And so many others who had, in ways large and small, contributed to the person he had become. No one walked the path alone, did they? Even those who seemed most solitary were shaped by encounters, by challenges offered, and lessons shared. The moon continued its arc across the sky, stars wheeling slowly overhead, time passing, as it always did, carrying all things forward in its steady flow. Lee had learned to appreciate these quiet moments between actions, these pauses that allowed for reflection, for integration, for the deepening of understanding. Is wisdom found in constant motion, or in the stillness that gives motion meaning? From this height, the village seemed small, contained, a collection of buildings and streets that could be taken in at a single glance. But Lee knew the truth was far more complex. Each building housed stories, each street carried histories, each flickering light represented lives, being lived with all their joys and sorrows, triumphs and struggles. This was what he protected as a shinobi of the leaf. Not just physical structures, not just a spot on a map, but this intricate web of connections, this community that had given him a place to belong despite his differences, despite his challenges. The wind picked up slightly, carrying a single leaf that spiraled upward before landing beside him on the stone. Lee picked it up, examining its intricate network of veins, its simple complexity. One leaf among thousands in the forests surrounding Konoha, yet unique in its precise pattern, its particular journey. Not so different from a human life, perhaps. What patterns do we create with our choices, with our persistence, with our willingness to rise again after falling? Lee stood, stretching muscles that had grown cool in stillness. The village slept below, would wake with the dawn to continue its rhythms of life. He too would return to those rhythms, to training, to missions, to the daily practices that formed the foundation of his ninja way. But he would carry this moment with him, this clarity, this perspective, this quiet appreciation for how far he had come and how much further he might yet go. The lotus of the leaf blooms twice, first in youth, with all its exuberant potential, its determination to prove itself against all odds, then again in maturity, with deeper roots, with wisdom earned through struggle, with the quiet certainty that comes from having tested oneself and discovered strengths previously unimagined. Rock Lee stood beneath the vast night sky, feeling both small and significant, both unique and connected to everything around him. The contradiction didn't trouble him as it once might have. He had learned to embrace paradox, to find balance within apparent opposition, to be both strong and gentle, both determined and flexible, both himself, completely, unapologetically, and part of something larger. He took one last look at the sleeping village, at the stars above, at the long path that stretched behind him, and the unknown journey that still lay ahead. Then he turned toward home, toward rest, toward whatever tomorrow would bring. The green beast of Konoha, the handsome devil of the hidden leaf, the Taijutsu master who had proven that limitations could become strengths, that hard work could create its own kind of genius. Just Rock Lee, walking his chosen path one step at a time, carrying his dreams and his determination with the same unwavering heart, moving forward into a future he had fought to make possible, with gratitude for every step of the journey, for every challenge overcome, for every hand extended in friendship or guidance along the way, for the chance to continue becoming who he was meant to be.